My fiancée, the Ice Queen CEO, the one they say is worth billions, ruthless in her methods, the undisputed titan of the business world, had her pregnancy test results leaked at our engagement party. The room erupted. My father was halfway out of his chair, ready to flip the table, demanding to know whose bastard child she was carrying. In an instant, every eye in the place swiveled and locked onto me. The family's good-for-nothing, a playboy heir whose only talent was spending money. Their gazes were a cocktail of mockery, contempt, and morbid glee, but the dominant flavor was a smug satisfaction that screamed, "You finally got what was coming to you." I was stunned, but then a wave of pure elation washed over me. I pointed at my own nose and shouted, my voice ringing with righteous indignation. "What are you all looking at me for? She's pregnant, but it's not mine. This engagement is off." The words barely left my mouth before my phone buzzed with a text. It was from her. From Isabella. "Are you sure the baby isn't yours? The way you begged me last night was adorable, so I've decided you can sleep with me again tonight." The text felt like venom-tipped needles stabbing into my eyes. The ecstatic grin on my face froze solid. Last night? I was at a bar last night, drinking alone. How could I have been with her? My mind was a chaotic mess, a whirlwind of fragmented images that refused to form a coherent picture. As I stood there, dazed, a cold hand slipped into the crook of my arm. It was Isabella Sterling. She stood beside me, her expression unreadable as she scanned the crowd. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the murmurs and reached every ear. "The drama is over. The child is Leo's. The engagement stands." With 2 sentences, she signed my death warrant. My father looked like he was about to have a stroke, pointing a trembling finger at me. "You worthless son." The Sterling family patriarch, however, remained as immovable as a mountain. He shot Isabella a long, meaningful look, then said nothing more. The sheer force of Isabella's presence was suffocating. I tried to wrench my arm free. "Let go of me. What the hell are you talking about?" She ignored me, simply flicking her eyes toward the bodyguards behind her. 2 men built like brick walls immediately moved in, flanking me. I was like a rabbit in a hawk's talons, completely powerless. "Isabella, you're insane. What are you doing?" I was forcibly dragged out of the ballroom and shoved into the back of a black Rolls-Royce. The door clicked shut, sealing off the world outside. "Give me my phone." I lunged for it. She simply raised a hand. A guard next to me clamped his hand around my wrist, the grip like a steel vise. I couldn't move an inch. She took my phone, powered it down, and tossed it aside. I was completely cut off. "What do you want? What gives you the right to say that baby is mine?" I roared, trying to drown out the panic rising in my chest. Isabella slowly undid the top button of her blazer. She angled her head slightly, revealing the pale, elegant line of her neck and collarbone. And there, stark against her skin, was a clear, intimate bite mark. She tapped a finger on the mark, her tone flat. "Don't you remember?" My heart hammered against my ribs. A fuzzy memory surfaced, a soft, yielding touch, the faint taste of blood. "No, it's impossible. I would never do something like that." I must have blacked out. The car drove to a sprawling estate in the hills of Greenwich. The staff lining the entrance bowed in unison. "Welcome, Ms. Sterling." "Welcome, Mr. Vance." "Mr. Vance? Since when was I the master of this house?" I was escorted inside, and the massive front door swung shut behind me. I rushed to the windows, only to find they were all reinforced, impossible to open. This place wasn't a home, it was a gilded cage. Isabella followed me in, the sharp click of her heels on the marble floor echoing my own frantic heartbeat. She advanced on me, step by step, until my back was pressed against a cold wall with nowhere to run. She raised a hand, her cool fingertips brushing against my throat. "Don't waste your energy," she whispered, her voice soft but heavy with an authority I couldn't defy. "From now on, everything about you belongs to me." The hair on my arms stood on end. This woman wasn't a person. She was a devil. That night, I lay in the unfamiliar bed, sleep a distant stranger. The door creaked open. Isabella entered, clad in a silk robe, her silhouette outlined by the moonlight. She placed a document on my nightstand. I glanced at it. The title read, "A Gentleman's Guide to Health During Preconception. For the sake of our child, take care of your body." With that, she turned and left, leaving me alone in the darkness to drown in humiliation and confusion. The next morning, Isabella was already at the office when I woke up. A lavish breakfast was spread on the dining table, and a butler in a tuxedo addressed me respectfully. "Mr. Vance, your breakfast is served." I didn't move. "Where are my credit cards?" I asked. The butler's expression didn't change. "Ms. Sterling has instructed that all of your cards be temporarily frozen. My stomach dropped. She's putting me under house arrest. Ms. Sterling has provided a supplementary card for you. It's on your nightstand, the butler added. It has no spending limit. I let out a cold, bitter laugh. Trying to buy me off with money? She seriously underestimated Leo Vance. I grabbed the black card and drove straight to the most extravagant stretch of Fifth Avenue. I was going to protest in the most decadent way I knew how. I bought a life-sized bull sculpted from solid gold because it looked utterly ridiculous. I bought 100 identical antique vases and had them lined up in the living room, a direct challenge to anyone with a fear of clutter. I even bought out an entire small art gallery, purchasing every single painting and having them all shipped to the estate. In one afternoon, I spent a 9-figure sum. I wanted to make one thing crystal clear. Leo Vance was a useless piece of trash who only knew how to burn through cash. If she married me, she could look forward to bankruptcy. That evening, I sat in the living room, surrounded by a mountain of luxury goods, waiting for Isabella to come home and explode. She returned, her gaze sweeping calmly over the chaotic scene. No anger, no questions. She walked over to the golden bull and tapped it with her knuckle. Good taste, she said coolly. If you like it, buy more. Use my primary card. That one truly has no limit. The air went out of my lungs. My grand rebellion was nothing more than a child's tantrum in her eyes. A crushing sense of defeat washed over me. Frustrated, I resorted to a more extreme tactic, a hunger strike. I refused to eat or drink, locking myself in my room. I thought she would worry, that she'd try to reason with me. Instead, she just called a house doctor. 2 bodyguards pinned me to the bed while the doctor expertly inserted and forced into the back of my hand. Cold nutritional fluid trickled down the tube and into my veins. Isabella stood by the bed, looking down at me. How are we supposed to have a second child if you ruin your health? Her voice was devoid of any warmth. Every act of defiance was like punching a pillow, futile and ridiculous. I was utterly defeated. One night, while she was in the shower, I snuck in her study. I was looking for anything, any clue that could help me escape. In a locked drawer, I found a file. I pried it open, and the contents made my blood run cold. It was a dossier on me. Everything was in there. My kindergarten doodles, my failing grade reports from elementary school, the cringy love letters I wrote as a teenager, the business plans for every failed investment I'd ever made. It even detailed my peanut allergy and the location where I'd gotten drunk for the first time. She had been a shadow lurking in the corners of my life, watching my every move. I grabbed the file and stormed into the bathroom. She had just finished her shower, a towel wrapped around her body, her hair still dripping. Why did you investigate me? I threw the file at her feet, papers scattering across the wet floor. She picked up a detention slip I'd written in middle school, glanced at it, then met my eyes calmly. Is there a problem with getting to know my husband? Her brazen confidence made me laugh in disbelief. We have a business arrangement. What gives you the not anymore? She cut me off. From the day of the engagement party, you became mine. A few days later, she took me to a private party. Her friends were all titans of industry, influential players. The way they looked at me was filled with undisguised contempt. In their eyes, I was just a pretty boy, a kept man who had married his way to the top. A man holding a glass of whiskey walked over, clapping me on the shoulder with a lecherous grin. Leo, you're a lucky man, catching the eye of our Miss. Sterling, you'd better be sure to service her well from now on. A wave of derisive laughter rippled through the group. My hands were shaking with rage. I was about to lash out when Isabella pulled me to her side, wrapping an arm around my waist in front of everyone. Her voice wasn't loud, but it silenced the entire room. He is my only weakness. Anyone who touches him answers to me. In that instant, all the laughter died. I looked at her cold, sharp profile, and a strange feeling stirred within me. It was humiliating, and yet, there was a bizarre flicker of vanity. Just when I thought I was doomed to be tormented by this she-devil for the rest of my life, a lifeline appeared. Isabella's cousin, Julian Thorne, came to the estate to see me. Julian was a senior VP at Sterling Industries, known in our circles as a perfect gentleman, mild-mannered and refined. The moment he entered, he dismissed all the staff. Leo, you've been through a lot, he said with a sigh, his face a mask of sympathy. I watched him warily. What are you doing here? I just can't bear to see you treated like this by Isabella, Julian said, his eyes radiating sincerity. She's been ruthless since she was a child. She'd do anything to secure her position at Sterling Industries. You're just a pawn for her to consolidate power, a tragic sacrifice. His words struck every one of my sore spots. The baby she's carrying isn't even yours, Julian lowered his voice. Shortly before the engagement party, she sent a business partner she was very close with to a remote post in Africa. If you count the weeks, it lines up perfectly. My heart leaped into my throat. Are you telling the truth? I have no reason to lie to you. Julian pulled a business card from his pocket and handed it to me. This is my private number. If you want to get out of here, I can help you. He leaned in closer, his voice a whisper only I could hear. I can get you a sample of her DNA. Help you run a paternity test. Once you prove the child isn't yours, you'll be free. Free. The word was like a lightning bolt, splitting apart the dark clouds that had gathered over me. I stared at the card in my hand, my heart pounding. This might be my only way out. That night, Isabella came home late, looking exhausted. As she slept, her brow was deeply furrowed, as if caught in a nightmare. She turned over, mumbling something incoherent. I leaned in to listen. Leo, don't go. Her voice was laced with a vulnerability and a pleading I had never heard before, nothing like the powerful, cold queen she was during the day. I froze. It was the first time I had ever seen her with her armor down. She wasn't so hateful like this. She was almost heartbreaking. The next morning, when I came downstairs, I saw her leaning against a wall, dry heaving. Her face was ashen, and her forehead was beaded with cold sweat. The butler stood beside her, holding a glass of water, his expression anxious. Ms. Sterling, please drink some water. She waved a weak hand, unable to speak. Seeing her in such a state, I felt a surge of irritation. I walked over, took the glass from the butler, and held it to her lips. Drink. My tone was harsh. Isabella froze. She looked up, her gaze complicated. It was no longer the cold, possessive stare I was used to. It held something I couldn't decipher. Surprise, confusion, and a flicker of warmth. She took a few small sips from my hand, and some color returned to her face. Thank you, she said softly. My heart, for some inexplicable reason, skipped a beat. I snatched my hand back as if I'd been burned. Don't get the wrong idea. I just don't want you dropping dead in front of me. It'd be bad luck. I turned and walked away, my steps a little too quick. Back in my room, I ran my hands through my hair in frustration. Julian's words and the image of Isabella's vulnerability were at war in my head. Was she really just using me? And Julian, could he really be trusted? For the first time, my own judgment felt shaky. I decided to test her. That evening, I deliberately opened a bottle of wine and got myself half drunk. When Isabella came home, I was sprawled on the sofa, my eyes glazed over. She frowned and came over to help me up. I seized the opportunity, grabbing her hand and pulling her into my arms. Her body went rigid. I mimicked the tone of her text message, breathing into her ear. The way you begged me last night was also very adorable. The air went still. In the next second, the world spun. I was flipped onto my back, pinned to the sofa with her on top of me. Her strength was astonishing. So you remember now? She loomed over me, her eyes as dangerous as a leopard stalking its prey. I was instantly half sober. She whispered in my ear, her voice like a hook, pulling the memories of that rainy night together piece by piece. 1 week ago, Eclipse Bar in Soho. You stormed in, soaked to the bone, and you wouldn't let go of my hand. You cried and begged me not to leave, telling me you were the most useless person in the world. My heart sank. That rainy night, it was the anniversary of my college startup being stolen from me. The day my business partner betrayed me and took everything I had built. The scar I thought I had hidden so well, my most humiliating secret, she knew all about it. I thought I had been alone that night, licking my wounds in a dark corner. Why? Why would I have gone to her? I couldn't remember a thing. Did we? I started, my voice strained. Did we sleep together? She didn't answer directly, instead tracing the line of my lips with her fingertip. You kissed me first. This fragmented truth only threw me into more confusion. Shame, anger, and an undeniable curiosity tangled inside me. Just then, her phone rang. It was an urgent video conference. She released me and went to her desk, opening her laptop. During the meeting, Isabella was dealing with a tricky overseas acquisition. The other party's legal team was sharp, having planted countless traps in the contract. Sterling's legal department was floundering, completely led by the nose. I was only half listening out of boredom. But when I heard one of the clauses proposed by the opposing lawyer, I instinctively frowned. It was an incredibly subtle legal pitfall. If she signed it, Sterling Industries would face astronomical patent lawsuits in the future. Seeing that Isabella was about to agree, I couldn't stop myself. Don't sign that. The virtual conference room fell silent. Everyone on screen stared in astonishment at me, the kept husband who had suddenly spoken up. Isabella turned to look at me, her eyes questioning. I didn't bother explaining it to her incompetent legal team. I walked straight to the laptop. They're exploiting the differences between EU and North American free trade zone intellectual property laws to create a retroactive clause. If you sign this agreement, you're effectively acknowledging the historical patent ownership of all their parent company subsidiaries, including those patents that have already entered the public domain. In less than 6 months, they'll sue you for patent infringement, and the damages will be at least 10 times the value of this acquisition. In a few sentences, I exposed their entire scheme. The faces of the lawyers on the other side of the video call turned pale. The executives from Sterling were staring in shock, as if seeing me for the first time. Isabella ended the call. She didn't speak. She just watched me, walking toward me step by step. Her gaze was something I had never seen before, scorching and intense, filled with a raw possessiveness, as if she wanted to devour me whole. "Leo," she said, stopping in front of me and raising a hand to my face. "How many more surprises are you hiding?" In that moment, my heartbeat spiraled out of control. It seemed the person she was in love with wasn't the useless playboy. It was the real me, the one I had kept hidden away. I had to know the truth. Was the baby mine or not? I took out the card Julian had given me and dialed the number. "I've made my decision. I want the paternity test." Julian's voice sounded pleased. "A wise choice. You'll need to get a DNA sample from her. Hair with the follicle still attached is best." After hanging up, I started looking for an opportunity. This had to be done without her knowing. Isabella was too sharp. I couldn't afford any mistakes. I decided her bathroom was the best place. People always shed hair in the shower. I waited for her to go in, then quietly slipped inside. The room was filled with steam and her signature, faintly cool scent. My heart was pounding like a drum as I searched nervously around the vanity and the shower drain. Just as I was about to pocket a long strand of hair, the bathroom door swung open. Isabella stood there, wrapped in a towel, her wet hair plastered to her cheeks. "What are you looking for?" I nearly jumped out of my skin, dropping what I was holding. I was just getting a razor," I stammered, my mind racing for an excuse. She raised an eyebrow, a playful glint in her eyes. So impatient. She walked toward me, water droplets tracing paths down her skin. I backed away until I hit the cold wall. "Since when are you allowed to touch my things?" Her breath was hot and moist against my face. I felt like I couldn't breathe. That night was a failure. A few days later, I finally found another chance. Early in the morning, I pretended to be asleep. The moment she left the room, I shot out of bed. I rushed to her pillow and searched carefully. Finally, tucked into a seam, I found several strands of hair with white follicles. I carefully wrapped them in a tissue and hid them in my pocket. My heart hammered against my ribs like I was a common thief. Following Julian's instructions, I placed the sample in a hidden trash can behind the estate. His contact would pick it up. After it was done, I felt completely drained. The wait for the results was agonizing. Every second stretched into an eternity. I was starting to feel afraid. What if the results came back and the baby really was mine? What would I do? Accept it? Admit that this woman had complete control over me? But if the child wasn't mine? The thought left an empty feeling in my stomach. These past few days, Isabella had been growing kinder to me. She no longer spoke in that icy tone and had even started trying to cook. Her dishes were always either too salty or burnt to a crisp, completely inedible. But watching her, dressed in her expensive power suits, awkwardly battling pots and pans in the kitchen, nearly setting her hair on fire, I felt a strange, protective urge for the first time. I walked over and took the spatula from her hand. "Move. I'll do it." She just stared at me, a smudge of soot on her cheek. She looked a little silly, but also kind of cute. I actually thought that if the baby really was mine, maybe it wouldn't be so hard to accept. The thought terrified me. I had to be losing my mind. The report was ready. Julian handed me a sealed envelope. "See for yourself." His expression was grim. My hand was shaking so badly it took me several tries to tear it open. I flipped straight to the last page. The conclusion, written in stark black and white, read, "Based on the DNA analysis, the alleged father, Leo Vance, is excluded as the biological father of the fetus." Excluded. Not mine. The baby really wasn't mine. A massive wave of euphoria washed over me. I was free. I could finally escape this crazy woman. Ha! I knew it. I knew it. I clutched the report and laughed like a maniac. Julian clapped me on the shoulder. "Congratulations, Leo. Now you have the proof you need to confront her." Feeling like a man granted a pardon, I raced back to the estate. I kicked open the door to her study. Isabella was reviewing documents and jumped at my sudden entrance. "Isabella, you liar." I slammed the paternity test report down on the desk in front of her. "Open your damn eyes and read it." The baby isn't mine. How long were you going to keep lying to me? I was braced for her shock, her anger, even a hysterical breakdown. Instead, she gave the report a calm glance without even opening the cover. There wasn't a hint of surprise on her face. She stood up, walked over to the projector on the side table, and pressed a button. A clear surveillance video appeared on the wall. The footage showed the back gate of our estate. A man in a baseball cap retrieved the tissue packet from the trash from where I'd left it. He then walked to a street corner and handed it off to another person. The camera angle switched. The second person opened the packet, dumped my carefully collected hair onto the ground, and replaced it with another sample they had prepared. The entire swap was recorded in crystal clear detail. My blood ran cold. I stared at her, unable to believe it. Isabella wasn't finished. She opened her desk drawer and pulled out another, identical envelope. She tore it open in front of me and took out the report inside. She spread it on the desk. The conclusion read, based on the DNA analysis, the paternal relationship between the alleged father, Leo Vance, and the fetus is supported with a probability of 99%. 99%. My mind went blank, a loud buzzing in my ears. How could this be? Did you really think you could hide anything from me on my own property? Her voice was calm, but it felt like an ice pick driving straight into my heart. From the moment you contacted Julian, my people, and his were watching you. I was dumbstruck. I was a self-important clown, and she had been monitoring my every move. It was a 1-second fall from heaven to hell. Not only had I failed to escape, but I had also become a pawn for Julian to use against her. Julian's goal was to use this fake report to force me into having an abortion and to make you leave me, she explained. Then, he could swoop in as the protector to comfort me and take advantage of the situation. Leo, you're smart, but you trusted the wrong person. She walked over to me and pulled my stiff, shocked body into her arms. Her embrace was tight, as if she wanted to merge me into her very bones. From now on, you're only allowed to trust me. Her voice was a hypnotic whisper in my ear. I had lost all will to fight, left with nothing but the crushing helplessness of being completely outmaneuvered and a strange, twisted sense of security from her protection. I broke. All my plans, all my hopes had turned to dust in an instant. I had been a fool, played by both her and Julian. Why? I pushed her away, my eyes bloodshot. You knew everything from the beginning. Why did you just watch me perform like a clown? Was it fun for you? Isabella looked at me, her eyes filled with a complex emotion I had never seen before. There was pain, guilt, and a deep, hidden love. Because I wanted you to see for yourself who truly cares about you. She finally dropped the pretense. She told me that the pregnancy test at the engagement party was no accident. It was all orchestrated by Julian. He had bribed one of the Sterling's house staff to accidentally drop the report in front of a reporter. His goal was to ruin her reputation and make the Sterling family a laughingstock. As for that night, she paused, her voice softening. Do you really not remember any of it? She walked toward me, cupping my face in her hands, forcing me to meet her gaze. That rainy night was the 3rd anniversary of your first company, the one you founded in college, being stolen from you by the brother you trusted most. It was the first time you showed the world your genius, and you were wounded so badly you almost didn't recover. After that, you started hiding behind this playboy facade. Everyone thought you were a lost cause, but I knew you were waiting for another chance, and terrified of another betrayal. Her words were a sharp knife, slicing open my most shameful past and exposing the raw, bleeding wound to the air. I trembled, speechless. I had never told anyone about that, not even my own parents. How did she know? I've been watching you for a long time, Leo. From the time you won the International Mathematical Olympiad at 16, to the first profitable app you built with your allowance at 18, to that devastating failure at 20. I know about every one of your successes, every one of your struggles. That night, I went to that bar specifically to wait for you. I knew you went there to get drunk on that day, every year. You were completely wasted. You treated me like a confessional, crying like a child, telling me all about your pain and your refusal to give up. You begged me not to go, not to leave you alone. Her words broke the dam in my memory. Fragments of that rainy night began to sharpen in my mind. The burn of alcohol, the cold rain outside the window, and the warmth of her embrace. We did sleep together. Her voice cut through my thoughts. It was after you sobered up. You looked at me. Your eyes were perfectly clear. You made the first move. But the next morning, when you woke up, you were overwhelmed with pain and shame, so you chose to run. You pretended you didn't remember anything, left in a hurry, and even left money for me on the nightstand. Her eyes turned to ice. What did you take me for? I felt like I'd been struck by lightning, staggering back a step. I remembered. I remembered everything. I was the one who had kissed her, the one who had initiated it. And I was the one who, out of cowardice and fear, had insulted her with money and fled the scene. You are not a failure, Leo. She looked at me, her every word resonating with conviction. You are the most brilliant person I have ever met. I will not allow you to hide behind a mask and debase yourself any longer. She knew all my secrets, my deepest scars, and yet she still chose to bind me to her side in this obsessive, controlling way. In that moment, my defenses completely crumbled. Years of pretense, years of frustration, years of pain and bitterness, all erupted in a flood of hot tears. I felt like a lost child who had finally found his way home. I threw myself into her arms and sobbed. She said nothing, just held me tightly, gently patting my back. I cried for a long, long time, until I was utterly spent. I lifted my swollen eyes to look at her, and for the first time, asked her seriously, why me? She leaned down and kissed the tears from my face. Because I was the only one who saw the real, shining you, hiding beneath the mask. Julian's scheme was exposed, but he wasn't done. When one plan failed, he devised another. He anonymously leaked this scandal to the media. Isabella Sterling had used a pregnancy and underhanded tactics to trap her fiancé in a dynastic marriage. In an instant, Sterling Industries was at the center of a firestorm. Headlines like Corporate Queen's ruthless power grab and the dirty deal behind a high-society merger were everywhere. The company's stock plummeted, losing billions in a single day. Julian seized the opportunity, rallying several old guard members of the board, citing the heir's improper conduct and severe damage to the company's reputation. He demanded an emergency board meeting to oust Isabella as CEO. Besieged from all sides and suffering from severe morning sickness, Isabella's health gave out. She collapsed during a senior management meeting and was rushed to the hospital. I stood outside her hospital room, watching her pale, exhausted face, and my heart felt like it was being torn apart. This was all my fault. If it weren't for my cowardice and denial, Julian would never have had so many opportunities to exploit. I couldn't hide anymore. I took out my phone and called my father. Dad, I need to access the private fund under my name. There was a long silence on the other end. Took you long enough, kid, he finally said. For years, I had cultivated the image of a spendthrift, a total degenerate. But only my father knew that most of the money I'd wasted had been funneled into a secret offshore investment vehicle, creating a massive private equity fund. She's your wife. You protect her. My father's voice held a note of pride he rarely showed. The next day, at the emergency board meeting for Sterling Industries, the room was thick with tension, filled with the company's directors and senior stakeholders. Julian sat at the head of the table, looking triumphant, as if victory was already his. Isabella is unwell, so I will be chairing today's meeting. We will now vote on the proposal to remove her from the position of CEO. The moment he finished speaking, the doors to the conference room swung open. I walked in, dressed in a sharply tailored suit. All eyes turned to me. I saw surprise, contempt, but mostly the anticipation of watching a train wreck. To them, I was the useless husband, here to make a scene. Julian didn't even try to hide his disdain. Leo, what are you doing here? This is no place for you. Get out. I ignored him and walked straight to Isabella's empty chair, sitting down. I tossed a file onto the table. Today, I am attending this meeting in a dual capacity, as a representative of Vance Holdings and as Isabella Sterling's legal husband. My gaze swept across the room cold and hard. Who was it that wanted to fire my wife? Julian sneered. On the grounds that her chaotic personal life has caused the company enormous financial losses. Is that so? I opened my laptop and connected it to the projector. Before you accuse others of having a chaotic personal life, perhaps you should take a look at this. A video appeared on the screen. It was Julian in a hotel room with a C-list actress. The footage was graphic, leaving nothing to the imagination. A collective gasp went through the room. The color drained from Julian's face. This is slander. Patience. There's more. I brought up the second piece of evidence. Bank statements and email records proving that Julian had been using his position to leak corporate secrets to a competitor for personal gain. Julian, you've been embezzling company assets and engaging in insider trading. This is enough to put you in prison for the rest of your life. I stood up, looking down on him. The playboy heir who used to tag along to parties was gone. In his place was a man with a sharp gaze and a commanding presence. The entire room was dead silent. Everyone was stunned by the sudden turn of events. Today, I, Leo Vance, was here to settle the score for my wife. Julian was blindsided by my evidence, but he quickly composed himself. Even if I made some mistakes, it doesn't change the fact that Isabella has brought negative publicity to this company. He turned to the other board members. Gentlemen, the stock is still falling. If this continues, all of our investments are at risk. The directors he had on his payroll immediately chimed in. He's right. We must remove Isabella and appoint a new leader to stabilize the situation. I agree. Isabella has to go. A smug grin returned to Julian's face. He thought he still had a chance to win. I looked at him like he was a pathetic clown. Who says the stock will keep falling? I announced to the entire room. Effective immediately, Vance Holdings will be injecting unlimited capital into Sterling Industries. Furthermore, we will be executing a complete buyout of all publicly traded shares to show our unwavering support for CEO Isabella Sterling. The announcement sent a shockwave through the room. Julian's smile froze on his face. Impossible. Your father would never agree to that. Because the capital injection is coming from me. I dial my fund manager and put the call on speaker. You can begin. A calm, professional voice came through the phone. Understood, Mr. Vance. Almost simultaneously, the cell phones of several board members began to ring. They answered, and their faces grew paler with each passing second. What? Our company's stock is under a hostile attack. Quick, mobilize our capital for a defensive buyback. It's too late. Their assault is too aggressive. We can't hold them off. The same directors who had been clamoring for Isabella's removal were now in a state of panic. Their own backyards were on fire. I had unleashed my private fund, launching a precise and devastating attack on the public companies owned by Julian supporters. Gentlemen, I walked to the center of the room, my voice low but carrying to every corner. You now have two choices. One, you can continue to back Julian Thorne and watch your own companies burn to the ground. Or two, you can vote to reject this ridiculous proposal, and together, we can make Sterling Industries stronger than ever. I guarantee that what you've lost today, you will earn back tenfold in the future. It wasn't much of a choice. A few minutes later, the vote was in. It was unanimous. The proposal to remove Isabella was rejected. Julian, abandoned by all his allies, collapsed into a chair, his face ashen. He had lost completely. Just then, the conference room doors opened again. Isabella walked in, supported by the butler. Her face was still pale, but her eyes had regained their usual cold, sharp focus. She walked up to Julian and threw a new project proposal, which she must have prepared long ago, in his face. You lose, Julian. The proposal was brilliant, enticing enough to make any investor salivate. It was her final move, a checkmate that solidified her support among the wavering board members. I looked at her, and she looked back at me. We shared a smile. Nothing more needed to be said. Julian was led away by the police. Embezzlement, corporate espionage, insider trading. The list of charges would ensure he spent the rest of his life behind bars. The storm had passed. In the now empty office, Isabella came up behind me and gently wrapped her arms around me. She rested her chin on my shoulder, her voice softer than I had ever heard it. My hero. I turned in her embrace, cupped her face in my hands, and kissed her. It was a long, tender kiss. No, I whispered against her forehead. I'm your man. The story of how I played the fool to save the day at the Sterling Industries board meeting spread through the business world like wildfire. It reached my father and the Sterling patriarch. My dad's voice was full of emotion when he called. You little bastard, you hit it well. I really thought you were a lost cause. I laughed. I take after you, Dad. There was a pause on the line. From now on, do whatever you want. If you don't want to take over the family business, I won't force you. It was the first time my father had ever given me the freedom to choose. A great weight lifted off my shoulders. The Sterling patriarch insisted on hosting a dinner for Isabella and me. At the table, the old man who had ruled the corporate world for a lifetime raised his glass to me. Leo, I was an old fool. I misjudged you. Isabella is lucky to have a husband like you. The Sterling family is lucky. He drained his glass, a silent apology for his earlier disdain. The two families sat together, the atmosphere more harmonious than ever. They were no longer discussing a cold, calculated merger, but a true, deep partnership for the future. I had finally shed the useless label that had followed me for over 2 decades and earned everyone's respect. But I realized the only person's opinion I truly cared about was hers. On the way home after dinner, Isabella rested her head on my shoulder, silent. The car was quiet. I thought she had fallen asleep and tried to shift so she could be more comfortable. Don't move, she said suddenly. I froze. Leo. She whispered my name. You're free now, she said. My family, your family, they won't pressure you anymore. You can do whatever you want, go wherever you want. My heart clenched. I knew what she was implying. I turned my head to look at her. Her face, usually so strong and commanding, now looked vulnerable, etched with an uncertain, cautious hope. This corporate queen, who feared nothing, was afraid. Afraid that I would leave her. I smiled. I wrapped my arms around her and pulled her into a tight embrace. Isabella, are you an idiot? I'm not going anywhere. I'm stuck with you for life. I felt her body relax in my arms. After a long moment, I heard her whisper, so faintly I almost missed it. Okay. With the crisis averted, our life finally returned to normal. Or rather, it settled into a new, unprecedentedly sweet preparental routine. I canceled all non-essential meetings to spend every moment with Isabella. I, who had never touched a spatula in my life, started learning how to care for a pregnant woman. I researched online, buying stacks of books on pregnancy nutrition. The first time I tried to cook, I nearly set the kitchen on fire. The second time, I mistook sugar for salt, and the soup I made was sickeningly sweet. But Isabella never complained. She ate every bite of my disaster cooking, without fail. Then, when she thought I wasn't looking, she would secretly go and throw it all up. I knew, but I never called her out on it. I just worked harder, practiced more. Finally, the day came when I managed to cook a decent 4-course meal. After she finished eating, she hugged me, her eyes shining. Leo, your cooking is the best in the world. In that moment, all the effort felt worth it. We would take slow walks together in the estate's garden, me carefully supporting her. We would read stories to our unborn child, my low voice and her cool, clear one weaving together in a surprisingly harmonious melody. I began to eagerly await the arrival of this new life. During one of the checkups, the doctor showed us the ultrasound. On the screen, the tiny life looked like a little dancing bean. The doctor pointed to a small, flickering dot. Listen, that's the baby's heartbeat. Thump, 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 thump. The strong, steady sound filled the room. In that instant, tears streamed down my face without warning. An immense sense of responsibility and a profound happiness I had never known before washed over me. This was my child, mine and Isabella's. On the way out of the hospital, I held her hand tightly, unable to speak. She seemed to sense my emotional state and remained quiet, just being there with me. It wasn't until we were back home, standing in the sun-drenched living room, that I stopped and turned to face her. Isabella. Thank you, I said. Thank you for finding me, for scheming against me, and for not giving up on me. I love you. The confession, long overdue, was finally spoken. Isabella stared, her eyes slowly welling up and turning red. It was the first time I had ever seen her cry, not from pain or frustration, but from joy. She stood on her toes and kissed me, smiling through her tears. You idiot. I love you too. I have for a long, long time. On the day of her due date, I was more of a nervous wreck than she was. When they wheeled her into the delivery room, I paced the hallway like a caged animal. Every second felt like an eternity. I could hear her muffled cries of pain from inside, and my heart twisted with each one. I wanted to storm in there and take the pain for her. I don't know how much time passed. Then, the sharp, loud cry of a baby cut through the quiet tension. Wah! My whole body jolted. The delivery room door opened, and a nurse came out, holding a bundle, a wide smile on her face. Congratulations, Mr. Vance. It's a boy. Mother and child are both healthy and safe. My mind was blank, the overwhelming joy making my knees weak. I was a father. Isabella and I had a child. I awkwardly took the tiny infant, wrapped in a blue blanket, from the nurse's arms. He was so small, so soft. His eyes were closed, sleeping peacefully. I felt my heart fill with an indescribable warmth. This was my son, the son of the woman I loved. Isabella was wheeled out a little later, changed into a clean hospital gown, propped up against some pillows. She watched me fumbling with the baby, a look of unprecedented gentleness and amusement in her eyes. She held out her hand. Bring him here, let me see. I carefully walked over and placed the baby beside her. She reached out a finger and gently stroked our son's soft cheek. We should give him a name, she said softly. I thought for a moment, looking at the clear sky outside the window and the sleeping child in our arms. Let's call it Asher, I said gently. It means happiness, a blessing. May he live a life of peace and joy. And to commemorate the peace we fought so hard to find. Asher Vance. Isabella whispered the name, the smile in her eyes deepening. It's a beautiful name. She looked up at me, Those eyes that were once so cold and sharp now filled to the brim with love and contentment. My Mr. Vance, you didn't just ruin all of my plans. You became the sweetest accident of my life. I leaned down and placed a reverent kiss on her forehead. Right back at you, Ms. Sterling. Years later, Julian Thorne was sentenced to life in prison, receiving the justice he deserved. I didn't return to Vance Holdings. Instead, I stayed at Sterling Industries, and together, Isabella and I built our business empire to new heights. The rumor in the corporate world was that Leo Vance, the former playboy, was now an even more formidable force than his wife. On a sunny afternoon, I was playing on the lawn with a toddler-aged Asher. Isabella sat on a lounge chair nearby, watching us with a gentle smile. Asher broke free from my grasp and ran on his chubby little legs, stumbling toward his mother. Mama, up! Isabella opened her arms and swept him up into a hug. She looked up at me and smiled. In the sunlight, the Ice Queen had long since melted away, leaving only endless warmth. She held out her free hand to me. Come here, let me hug both of my boys. I walked over and wrapped them both in a tight embrace. Once, I thought freedom was what I wanted most. Now I understand. Wherever she is, that's my home. My only destination.